Okay, so like Connie Lynn mentioned, my name is Fatema, and I'm going to be telling you today about how your interns might actually be sad, because they probably are. So before I get started, I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm a fourth-year computer science student at the University of Waterloo, and we're kind of a special school. We're up in Canada, and we have this thing called the co-op program. So if you don't know what a co-op program is, it's like a working/studying thing. My co-op program in particular means that I'm meant to do 5 internships before I graduate. Working on the 5th one right now. So by the time I graduate, I'm meant to have like 1.5 to 2 years experience in the industry. Some of the places I've worked before are just Yelp, Facebook, and Rackspace. I'm finishing up my I'm starting my 5th internship right now with Facebook. This is a picture of me in a witch's costume. If you go on my LinkedIn, it'll say I'm a computers witch. But most of my internships have been in the ops and site reliability space. So I'm here to talk about a little bit about how you can be a great mentor for an intern when you're in this like ops and SRE space, which is a little bit different than software development. A couple things I wanted to mention. My Twitter handle and my website are on the bottom of every slide. Feel free to take pictures of my slides and post them on Twitter. Just remember to tag me, because I love to keep track of where there are beautiful pictures of my face. And if you want to follow along with the slides, that's the link for that. The redirect might be broken. I'm sorry. Jekyll just doesn't cooperate sometimes. So before we get into how to be a good mentor for an intern, I want to talk a little bit about why it's important to mentor interns and why you might want to mentor an intern if you have the opportunity. So having an intern can actually be really, really productive for your team. Some of the interns that I've known in my life, like these are some real life impacts they've had, taking the deployment time down for an application from 12 minutes to 3 minutes, helping the team move their entire deployment to Kubernetes. A project I worked personally on was making automatic re-imaging for your servers with Pixie Boot. So those are just intern projects that people finished in like 12 to 16 weeks. You can also learn a lot from having an intern. Like your intern is coming from a completely different experience from you, and they might have a lot of stuff to teach you. And if you mentor them, then you get this opportunity to like work on them with stuff, and they might end up being really cool. And also, it'll make your team better, because when your intern starts, they're not going to know anything about your processes or your documentation or what your team is like. And that is really quickly going to show you the deficiencies you have with your onboarding process, especially when your intern is like, first time working in the industry kind of thing. So I like to start this talk from a place of empathy. So I just want to build some empathy for y'all in the room about what it's like to be an intern, in case you've never been one or you've never really like hung out with an intern before. Interns are short-term, full-time employees, and this puts us in a very weird space. So we're working full-time on the team just like the rest of everyone else, but we're around for like 12 weeks or 16 weeks. And just think about the pressure of trying to be a productive employee when you spent the first month ramping up on infrastructure, and now you have like all of 2 months left to actually build a product. Many interns are simultaneously doing work for their school. My school requires that we complete a professional development course online during the internship, as well as usually a 10-page report at the end of the internship about what we've done or something related to our work. I've known interns that are taking a full course load online while doing their co-ops and their internships, which I do not recommend, but they were doing it. Interns are often far from home in a new city, and I'm sure all of you have moved once or twice in your life, but I don't know if you've ever tried to move to San Francisco and look for a reasonably priced 4-month lease close to work because you can't get a car. This kind of stuff is really, really stressful, especially leading up to the internship and right when you start. It can feel really isolating, and it can be really, really hard to feel like you belong. I don't know, a lot of people don't seem to know this. Interns don't usually have benefits. I've worked at exactly one company where I had almost comparable benefits to full-time employees. So your interns probably don't have health insurance from the company. They probably don't have sick days. They probably don't get any paid PTO. And like if you have like other sorts of wellness benefits or things that you kind of just take for granted in tech, your interns do not have those. Obviously, interns are probably less experienced than you and the rest of the team. Imposter syndrome is rife in our industry, but when you're an intern, and you are like still in school and you're shoved into this like full-time experience with a bunch of people who have been around a lot longer, it can definitely exacerbate the problems with imposter syndrome. So this talk is structured into 3 parts. We're going to talk about what you should do before your intern starts, because little known fact, the internship does not start when that person gets on campus. And then what you can do to be a good mentor during your intern's experience, and also a few things about what you can do if, despite your best efforts, or maybe your not so best efforts, things could go wrong. So the first thing you should really consider before even taking on an intern or deciding to get an intern is, are you even ready for an intern? Being an intern mentor is a huge commitment, and some people really don't consider this. It's not just a sink on your time. Like, you are usually expected to continue on with your own projects while you're mentoring your intern. So if you think that you have a lot of your own personal work coming up, you probably won't have time to mentor them. And it's also a lot of emotional energy and commitment in that sense. Like, mentoring a junior engineer, and especially someone who might be younger or brand new to the industry in general, it takes a lot of emotional bandwidth, and you have to decide if you have that commitment to give for like 12 or 16 weeks. Does your team have documentation? And if your team does not have good onboarding documentation, this isn't just a problem for your interns. You like can't hire people, because like, what are they gonna do? They're like sitting there, they've never seen your infrastructure before, and they're like, what the fuck are these names? Like, why are you just throwing these weird terms at me? So always make sure that you have enough documentation for someone to onboard. You want to make sure that you have buy-in from the other members of your team. If the rest of your team doesn't feel prepared to occasionally be mentoring and helping this new person out, that's going to be a problem for your intern, because obviously, ideally at least, they're going to be working with everyone on the team. Like, just because you're their mentor, that doesn't mean you're the only person who's going to be working with them. And the last and potentially very important thing that I want to talk about is project preparation. You want to make a project that will be useful for your team and good for your intern. A couple of things to keep in mind about that are, like, what are your interns' experiences? What do you think they're going to be interested in? What are you working on for the next 4 months? Because if your project that you're working on is completely unrelated to what your intern's doing, you're not going to be interfacing with them on a day-to-day basis. And that sucks for your intern, because now they're like, well, I have this mentor. They've never touched a piece of code I've ever written, and like, they're not really mentoring me very much. And the last thing to consider is that the project is not completely isolated from the rest of what the team works on. It's realistic to what the full-time experience on your team is like. If you have an intern who's working on a project by themselves, siloed off, that's really isolating. And if the rest of your team is doing a whole bunch of other stuff along with their day-to-day work, you want to make sure that the intern's project contributes to that work as well. So, like I mentioned, you want to build a project that has something to do with the interests and experiences of your intern. And obviously, this means that you're going to have to talk to your intern before they start working so you can design this project. So the first thing you want to talk about is, what projects have they worked on in the past? What is their experience? If they know anything about your team, what are they interested in working on if they have those ideas already? You should definitely be talking about your expectations before they start working. What does this internship mean? What does it mean at the end of the internship? Is a return offer up for grabs? Is a full-time position available on your team at the end of it? And you should also see what they're expecting. Like, are they expecting to be writing a lot of code? Or are they expecting to be doing a lot of like triaging and ticket work? Or are they expecting to be doing incident management? Like, all of these things have to be discussed before they get there, so they're not showing up on day one with no idea of what's going on. You should also try to send your intern information and resources about your team. If you're writing a lot of Python and your intern says, I've never written Python, maybe send them a book, or send them links to a couple tutorials that you think might be helpful. But always make sure that you tell them that it's optional, because as interns and students, we will do anything if we think there's even a slight chance that it might be required, and they might not actually have time to do it, and they'll just overwhelm themselves with all of this work if you don't make sure that they know that it's optional. And it's also important to talk to them about the logistics of their moving. Like I mentioned, moving to a new city by yourself is really stressful. I worked one of my co-ops in Texas, in San Antonio, and I had to secure a 4-month lease in some house in Texas on Craigslist, because obviously I was in Canada when I was trying to get this lease. So it was very sketchy and very weird, but the mentor and the manager I had at that time, they set up a weekly call with me, and they would be like, okay, how's your visa going? Have you gotten a house? Have you figured out how you're gonna get to and from work? And my manager actually visited the house that I found on Craigslist for me and scoped it out and met with the landlady and stuff. And that was really, really encouraging. And it was just so nice to have a person on the ground during that time. So now we're gonna talk a little bit about how to be a great mentor during your intern's internship. So you really, in the beginning of their term, want to set them up for success. So interns will usually probably go through your company's regular orientation, and hopefully they'll be told about what resources they have access to in terms of like, documentation, company benefits, HR people, who their chain of command is, all that kind of stuff, like who they can talk to. But you don't know for sure if they will unless you're going to that orientation with them. So as the mentor, you also want to make sure that they know everything you know, so that if they get lost or if they're stuck, they know what they have access to in terms of resources. In the beginning of their internship, I do recommend that you do frequent check-ins. When you're like a new person to any company, but especially when you're young or when you're still in college or this is your first time in the industry, you feel like you're bugging people all the time. Like you never feel like it's okay to poke someone and be like, hey, I'm stuck. So just because your intern isn't saying anything, that doesn't mean that they're fine. So it's like nice, once a day, ping them, be like, hey, are you blocked? How's it going? Do you want to have a one-on-one? That kind of stuff is like, it goes a really long way. You also want to provide your intern like opportunity for growth outside of the scope of their like regular project. Like coding something really impactful over 4 months is cool and good, but coding something really impactful over 4 months and being told, hey, you did a really good job on this, do you want to speak about it at a conference, is like amazing superstar level. I wouldn't even be at this conference if I hadn't been mentored during my internships that, you're a good speaker, you should try to speak at conferences. So that kind of stuff also helps a lot for when you're an intern mentor. Like I mentioned during the project section, treat them like a full member of the team. Like if you're an ops team and everyone on the team has pseudo, like give your intern pseudo. They're not gonna fuck up. Like they're so much more scared of messing something up than a regular full-time person, believe me. So it's not like that risky to give an intern pseudo or to have them involved in incident response if that's something that's like regularly part of your team. I know a lot of people feel like putting interns on call and on point and on triage can be like, it's not fair because they're only here for 4 months and you're bogging them down with all these details of ops, which are like the worst part of being a sysadmin. But the reality is it's like what being an ops person is, and if they want to do this during their lives, they're gonna have to do it a little bit. So at least present them with the opportunity to get involved in the rest of the team's work and see if they're gonna take you up on it. So during this part of the talk, I wanted to talk a little bit about these 3 words in case they're confusing or they seem like they might all mean the same thing and you're not really sure. But an intern mentor should ideally be all of these things to their intern. So mentorship is like, hey, did you know that you could apply for this thing? Like, hey, Fatima, did you know that you can apply to DevOpsDays to speak? Just like informing them of opportunities and helping them figure out what those opportunities for them are. Sponsorship would be like, hey, I heard about this opportunity. I think you'd be great for it. Do you want me to suggest you? Or do you want me to talk to the people who run this conference so that you can give this talk? And advocacy is more like when you hear about an opportunity and you have power in that position and you are in a situation where you think that your intern would be really good for like, you're in a team meeting and someone's like, oh, we have this task that's a really great opportunity for impact. And you're like, hey, my intern would be great at this. We should consider my intern. That's advocating for your intern. This slide is probably maybe like the most important slide in this talk. You should never have an intern at the end of 12 weeks that is surprised that they didn't get the return offer. And I know that doesn't sound realistic, but I have known like a bunch of interns who at the end of their term was like, I thought I did a really great job, like I had a great time, I bonded really well with my team, and they don't want me back, and that feels terrible. So the first thing is that you want to build realistic expectations together right from the get-go. Like you want to meet with your intern, you want to tell them exactly what you're expecting and hear what they're expecting of you, and like figure out if you're on the same page. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay. And now we're taking a small break. Yeah, okay. You also want to be providing regular feedback. Again, interns are scared. They're not going to ask for feedback on their own time, most likely. I am very obsessive. During my first internship with Facebook, every week I met with my intern, I was like, hey, if this internship ended right now, would I get a return offer? And that's just me. Like, other people aren't like that. And honestly, they're going to be like, if no one is telling me that I'm doing anything wrong, I'm sure I'm fine. So you want to make sure that your intern knows exactly how they're doing and how they can improve, because just being told at the end of the internship about what they did wrong, that's not going to help. And you should also be asking what you can do better to support them, just constantly, like during all of your one-on-ones. You should try to solicit feedback from other team members, other people that your intern has worked with. Like I mentioned, you're not the only person they're interacting with, and they're probably having a lot of like code reviews, a lot of meetings with other people on the team, a lot of other like conversations, and you want to see what other people think of your intern as well. This might seem obvious, but just like ask your intern how they're doing. Internships can be really, really isolating, like I mentioned, especially if you're the only person on a team. And they might, like interns might not feel like they have a lot of good social relationships at work. And you might be their only point of contact at work that they're comfortable talking to. And if you don't like check in with them on a regular basis about their mental health and how they're doing, they might not tell you, and you might not know that anything's wrong. So the last part of this talk is about what you can do when stuff goes wrong. Despite your best efforts, your intern might be sad. Something might have happened in their life, something unexpected came up, and you have to like be there for them and help them get through the rest of whatever they have left in their internship. So the best thing you can do is offer new options, different working hours, a different project, a different timeline. Maybe they just need to be doing something else entirely that's like less related to your team, but maybe still work. You should also pivot your expectations. So that meeting you had at the beginning of the term where you talked about your expectations and theirs, have another one. See what they think that they can accomplish in the time they have left with the energy that they have left, and try to accommodate that for them. You also want to be their best advocate. Ideally, you're the person who's been working with this intern the most throughout the semester, and you know their situation the best. You know what their strengths are. You know if they deserve to come back. So when you're sitting down with your manager or your manager's manager and they're like, hey, should we hire this intern for full-time? And you know exactly what happened and what went wrong, like it might even be your fault. You need to be honest, and you need to advocate for them, and you need to make sure that they're getting the fairest treatment they can get possible. And that is my talk. I just wanted to thank all of these people up on the slide, especially Jen Davis, because the first time I ever had a conversation with her, I think I mentioned something about internships, then she was like, that would make a good talk for DevOpsDays. So I applied to DevOpsDays because of it. I also really wanted to thank the white coat captioning people. They've been at every conference I've been to for the past year. Yeah. And they do a really great job. We have some really weird words in tech. And they always get them right. It's amazing. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I am graduating in a year, and I am interviewing now. So if you like this and you want to see more of it, you should hook me up with your company. And that's all. Thank you.